Welcome back to Let's Talk Tax, powered by McGuire Sponsel. I'm your host, TJ Sponsel, and today we're diving into a topic that sits at the intersection of business and people. Why do teams filled with talented, capable people still underperform? What separates a good team from one that's truly high-performing? To unpack that, I'm joined by our Chief People Officer, Kiley Ewing. Kiley leads the firm's people and culture initiatives here at McGuire Sponsel, and she's been instrumental in helping us connect performance, process, and people development in practical and measurable ways. We're talking about the human side of performance, how behavioral data, resilience, and data accountability can transform how teams work together. Let's get started. Welcome, Kiley.
Thank you, TJ.
Well, this is a privilege to do this for the first time, here on Let's Talk Tax with you, Kiley, is that for all of our audience, Kiley's been a long time part of McGuire Sponsel, even though formally she joined us early in 2025 as our Chief People Officer. And I think when Kiley and I were talking about this role for McGuire Sponsel, naturally as a Chief People Officer, HR is part of that. But I made it clear to Kiley when we talked, I said, talent development is the number one priority here. And so I wanted to spend today's episode and really kind of diving into a little bit of the secrets that you've implemented over the years to help ensure that you do have a high-performing team. And so, again, thank you for your time today, and thank you for all you've done for McGuire Sponsel. So with that, Kiley, why do teams with talented people constantly underperform?
Well, I boil business down to really two things: people and processes at its simplest form, right? And this is an oversimplification because we know there's a lot that goes into business. But when you think about business in those two aspects, there's stress that comes with both of those. So when you think about the types of stress that organizations can experience, it really comes down to three types of stress. So from a process standpoint, there's organizational and operational stress. The operational stress is more so stress from the day-to-day work. So that's just task orientation, right?
Mm-hmm.
My job is stressful. Organizational stress is the system is broken. So right now there's a lot of industries with broken systems that are trying to overcome those challenges. And it not only is difficult to succeed in that kind of broken structure, but it also creates a ripple effect of more operational stress on the people. And then the third type of stress is relational stress, which, as it sounds like, is based on the relationships inside of the organization, which is how your people interact with each other, right?
Okay. Sure, they can. And I think one of the challenges that we have as a firm, being 100-ish people across multiple offices, is how does that communicated? How is that handled? I think one of the things that we've learned is I'm a Gen Xer. Okay, well, there's an aspect that I can just figure out how to get things done. Okay, well, there's a obviously a shift or a difference between how a millennial communicates and how they deal with things.
Mm-hmm.
How do organizations deal with that? Because you talk about all the firms that we serve across the country, and the people dynamic is the most challenging dynamic in our business. How do you handle that communicating? Okay, operational stress, organizational stress, relational stress. How do you handle the communication between parties to be able to identify the source of the stress and label it properly?
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. The most foundational component to any organization is the people. So if you can master the relational component of your business, then you have a solid foundation, and then you can optimize the organizational and operational aspects of your business. So step number one is gaining some self-awareness around how your people best operate. So here at McGuire Sponsel, when I first started, as you know, the first thing I did was implement an assessment tool called the Aptive Index. And we got some self-awareness around how our people are hardwired and how they best operate. And it measures 4 main drivers. And these are drivers that everyone is hardwired with to a degree. We all have a measurement of these 4 drivers. 1 is influence, 2 is sociability, 3 is consistency, and then 4 is precision. So we all have a desire to leverage these drivers, but to a varying degree based on person to person. So if we can understand how people are hardwired, we can then leverage their strengths and then pair them up with other people who might have complementary strengths where we might have weaknesses. So for me, I'm more efficiency driven, which means,
Absolutely.
yeah, as you know, which
Yes.
means my detail orientation or my precision is very, very low. So I don't get caught up in accuracy and making sure things are perfect. I am like, good is good enough. Let's move on to the next thing because I want to make sure I'm swiftly moving through my tasks so I can stay focused on the bigger picture. Now, I can't forget about the details because they do matter. So I have to find somebody, which thank God for Tammy. I found somebody who's very complimentary and likes to live in the details and
Mhm.
has a high precision. So I've optimized my team's function in that way. So having some awareness around that is so crucial.
Well, and I think we've used Aptive to be able to, with the goal of building out a complementary workforce. And you look at different groups and different teams within our firm, and you can look at the Aptive Index and layer on top of each other. And a lot of people are the exact same,
Hmm.
which isn't necessarily a healthy practice because they skew one way and maybe have the same and have the same weaknesses,
Right.
which may be in execution, for example. And so it's something that absolutely the data is very powerful. The testing is very powerful. Full disclosure, I was the last one to take the Aptive, okay, because I was leery of Kiley being able to read me like a book. But I did take it. So I think one of the lessons that we've learned as we've embarked on this 2030 vision as a firm, and I hope that other people can relate to this, is the the term radical candor. Okay, I think when we heard that term years ago, I think some people in our firm you thought that was, oh my gosh, that's too dangerous.
Mhm.
Okay, because we don't want to risk losing anybody. But as we've employed that over the past couple of years, the types of conversations that we're having with our people now are much more focused and tailored to the individual than they ever have been before. In addition to explain the why we're doing things, I think this era of 20 somethings coming out of college, and I would say early 30s, what we're experiencing is they're in a very inquisitive group. When I came out of college, it was very much you didn't question a partner, you didn't question a manager. Okay, you came in, you did your job, you obviously tax season was tax season, non-tax season was non-tax season. You chased deadlines. You got a please or a thank you, possibly, depending on the individual that you reported to. And you just did your 2 or 3 years in a senior, 2 or 3 or 4 years a manager, and et cetera. Now it's very important for us as leaders to explain the why, okay, of why we're doing something or why we're not doing something. And that involves radical candor. Can you kind of peel that back a little bit and explain kind of the mechanics of why that's important and where maybe some applications where it's been very successful or possibly where it's been unsuccessful?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to, I mean, you've heard of the golden rule, right?
Sure.
Treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, it's now evolved into the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated. So I think a lot of this comes down to if you're not speaking to me in my language, I don't necessarily understand what you're saying. And you might be totally correct. I just am not interpreting it correctly because you're not saying it in a way that resonates with my logic. And I think it goes back to, again, if we look at these drivers, somebody who is high in influence is going to want to control things. And so, like, I'm high in influence, right? So my husband will tell you, I don't like to be told what to do. Shocking. And so he has to say things to me and make it my idea. and this is sneaky little technique, but it always works because if I can come up with the idea, then I'm more bought in. But if it's his idea, then it's like, nah, that's not really what I'm feeling right now. So if we can speak to each other in a way that resonates more intuitively to our own language. So think of somebody that is high in precision. They're going to want all the details. So if you say, "Hey, can you figure out how to increase revenue by 10% next quarter?" That will be crippling. But if you told somebody who's high in influence, "Hey, can you figure out how to increase revenue by 10% next quarter?" They will love that project because they want the freedom to get there however they want to get
Sure.
there. But you have to know, how does that person best operate? Do I need to give them lots of autonomy or lots of instruction? So I think that's where we can misunderstand each other, where somebody who asks questions or maybe seems like they're pushing back on something, they're really just trying to get more detail, or they're trying to understand, where is this coming from? Because it's not my idea. I know it's coming from somebody of authority and I know I should be listening, but I don't get it.
Mhm.
So I think that's where we miss each other more often than not.
And, and over the course of our relationship here, I know you love the word resilience.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Can you kind of walk our listeners through resilience and why that's important in the development of people?
Yeah. I think, the self-awareness part of this is great, but you can be self-aware all day long, but if you have no resilience, I mean, you're only going to go so far. So when I think about resilience, the definition that I use is advancing despite adversity. It's no secret. We're all going to face adversity at some point in our lives. It's how we handle it that will separate the high performers from everyone else. High performers don't get discouraged from adversity. They take it as a learning opportunity and say, okay, how can I use this information to get stronger in my skills or to do better next time? And so when it comes down to resilience, we have to think, there are some scary statistics, and I'll just share a couple with you because you may think, like, what does resilience have to do with my business? But according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 76% of U.S. workers reported at least one symptom of a mental health condition. And then if you look at a report from the Society for Human Resource Management, it indicates that 75% of U.S. workers say they have experienced at least one mental health challenge, such as anxiety, depression, grief, or suicidal thoughts in the past year. That means 3/4 of our staff are experiencing some sort of mental health issue. So if we are not proactively developing resilience, they're going to be impacted by their mental health challenges, and it's coming to work with them.
Well, and that's I appreciate you sharing those stats with us. But the question is, I think the fear sometimes is that we are in such a hyper competitive environment for people. Okay, is that we're sitting there fighting in the same sandbox for the same people. How hard does an organization push development, and how hard does they push for resilience in people? Because there's always the risk that they could leave. And I think that's a situation that we found ourselves in as a firm. I think we're better at it than we were, and I appreciate you and other leaders in the firm bringing that to light. But what are some of the tools that we can use to elevate them to not to have the radical conversations? I call it cleaning the laundry, doing the laundry. Let's get all the dirty laundry out. Let's get that, and let's establish an expectation and an awareness with that person, because there's a good chance that those things have never been brought to light for them.
Absolutely.
I mean, and I'm not trying to mock any demographic or any generation, but we give participation trophies out now.
Right.
Okay, a meritocracy is kind of lost a little bit
Absolutely.
right now in our culture, and so how do we press people without pushing them out the door to the point that, like, you know what, this is too much, this is too heavy, I'm going to go somewhere else.
I think there's a greater risk if we don't invest and develop in our people. And you know what? I also have the mindset of abundance, where I don't look at the talent market right now and think, oh gosh, there's not enough talent out there. So if somebody doesn't align with our organization, that's okay. There's going to be another company out there that will be a great fit for them. And we might be standing in the way of them getting to their next opportunity that could be better suited for them. The other part of this is we have a greater risk if we don't develop our people, because
Completely agree.
I think more people want to grow. It is our human nature. We want to advance. That resilience definition is advancing despite adversity. It's not staying stagnant.
Sure.
It's advancing because we as humans want to develop and we want to escalate in life.
Well, I think ultimately we got to find out what their motivators are.
Totally.
Because if we do not find out what their motivators are, then our blueprints are a jumbled mess.
That's right.
We have people in our firm that are very content with the position they're in.
Yep.
Okay. We have other people in the firm that they're ascenders. they're constantly trying to grow. Okay. Well, it doesn't mean that the people that are content with their role are bad. They're very purposeful in our firm, and we're going to do our best to respect them and reward them and provide opportunities for them in that role. Okay. But we also got to create another path for the ascenders so that their success is not coming at anyone else's cost. I think that's the perception sometimes we run into, Kiley, is that people look at that my opportunity for growth, somebody's going to take my opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think it gets into our growth mindset that we talk about a lot, is that our duty as an organization is to continue to grow. So we're creating not just height, but width, so that people are growing and there's plenty of room for them to grow. So their opportunity and their growth, their individual growth, doesn't come at somebody else's expense. I think that is something that we have to fight as an organization and as a culture and as leaders. That's why we have that growth mindset.
Well, you hit on, I think, one of the most important aspects of resilience, which is having a vision. People who don't have a vision struggle to identify their purpose on this planet. So having a vision, I think of as like the North Star to resilience. You have to know, or at least have this fuzzy picture of where you want to go in life. What are some of the goals that you want to attain? Where do you want to be 10, 15, 20, 25 years from now? A lot of people don't have any clue where they want to be a year from now, let alone 25 years from now. So the more you have line of sight on that vision, the more committed you're going to be to having tenacity and bouncing back when setbacks come to you, because everybody is going to have setbacks.
It's also having perspective.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes perspective is lost because it's like and that's why I always say my good days are not as good as they could be, and my bad days are not as bad as they could be. Yeah. Is that it's keeping perspective, and I think that's what's hard. You can't teach perspective. That, in my opinion, that's an earned feeling, is an emotion or behavior. Is that I have perspective. I'm at a stage of life where I've had some failures, okay, and I've experienced them, and you're like, okay, well, it's not as bad as that. But I think that's the other piece that we have to learn how to navigate around in helping them have perspective. And as a firm of McGuire Sponsel, we've grown tremendously over the past 10 years. We've doubled twice over the past 10 years. And I think sometimes people come in and they come out of college, okay, in a pretty sheltered environment, and they come into McGuire Sponsel and look at our reach, and it's like, it always hasn't been like this. Okay, Dave McGuire's, his knowledge and his brand and his reach hasn't always been the way it is. He had to earn that. I think that's the things that I look at as a leader in our firm, going, okay, how are we managing expectations? How are we communicating the opportunity? How are we trying to mine through the learned perspective, the importance of perspective? Okay. At the same time, I think here's the other secret ingredient that we talk about a lot is grit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think, what people typically think of when they think of resilience is the tenacity component of it, which is, and I'll go back to the perspective piece. There are pieces of it that you can teach. You can't teach the experience part because a lot of that perspective comes from experience. Sure. But what you can do is prepare people for failures they could encounter.
Or have them be okay with it.
Right.
Is that and that's the thing, is that, and we've seen that in our offices, you know, something will happen and either a flight gets canceled, or we don't get the information we need, or we make a mistake. Yeah. All right. And you're like, okay, it's okay. You know, I get a lot of calls when I'm traveling the country, and one of our colleagues would call me and like, oh my gosh, the sky's falling. I'm like, you know, that's okay. All right. We're big enough. We can take that. That's a little ding, or I use a lot of illustrations. That's a pothole. Right. The bridge isn't out. Yeah. Okay. Let's have some perspective on what we're dealing with here.
Well, and typically you say what? Take a deep breath, right? Because what that actually does is reset your brain, because you are actually giving oxygen to your brain. And essentially, when like your computer is on the fritz, right? What does IT tell you? Restart it every time. That is the mindfulness component that can trigger your prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain that's responsible for executive functioning, and turns on your critical thinking. But if we're frantic and we're stressed out, we can't access that part of our brain.
In 2024, I went on a listening tour around I actually went on a listening tour in 23, and I went on a different listening tour in 24. And it was really fascinating because I got to see all the melting pot of this firm, okay, and what makes people tick. And a lot of it was trying to find out what their motivator it was and is, as well as trying to explain the why we're doing things. We have a really smart workforce. We actually have an entire group that's their job is to try to find out what's qualified research for clients, okay? But I was failing as a leader because I wasn't committed to explain the why. And I think that, and the more we can explain the why, then we can take all these different goals and the resiliency, the grit, the awareness, the perspective, and we can get them to stick or adhere.
That's right.
Adhere to those the reasons that we're doing it. Okay, the reasons why we're doing it, or the reasons why we're not doing it. And it was insightful, and it did two things. Number one, it brought some things to light on how we can improve an organization. Okay, and it established an emotional connection between me and an employee. That still 2 years later, 1 year later for some people, it's still there today. That they feel comfortable calling me, and because ultimately, what I want to know is what's your grit factor. That's what I'm trying to learn is what's your grit factor. So when we have a real stressful situation or we have a tight deadline, I'm trying to develop the bench or the roster that I can look to. And that's been the fun part about development is really rolling up the sleeves and having frank conversations with young people and even people that have been here 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, helping them understand that, this isn't McGuire Sponsel as in Dave McGuire, TJ Sponsel, or Kiley Ewing or Kelsey Brewer or Tim LeMasters. This is our firm. And you have the opportunity to put your thumbprints over this, just like I did back in 2007, in 2008, 2009.
You probably don't realize this, but you were deploying the whole resilience model in your listening tour, because what you were doing by explaining the why and asking them these questions is helping them with their reasoning skills. Giving them the why allows them now to better understand what's going on at a higher level and gives them the perspective, right, that can help them control their emotions. So another component of resilience is composure. When we think of composure, it's like keeping your stuff together, right? When things hit the fan.
So Kiley, in our last few moments here, before you were our chief people officer, okay, you had a firm that did a lot of coaching, a lot of training and development of people. Obviously, we talked a little bit about McGuire Sponsel and kind of what we've employed. What would you say the top 2 flaws are of a business's approach to developing people?
They're afraid to have tough conversations. And 2, there's a lack of accountability. People are more comfortable venting about the problem than actually having the conversations required to solve them. And then accountability really is a proactive tool to prevent the problems. And we've, I think, tarnished the reputation of accountability and given it this negative, I don't know, negative outlook, or it comes with a stigma that accountability is this mean tool to leverage to get people
it's actually
to
a
do
very
things,
powerful
right?
tool if used right.
Well, and people like accountability. We like to have clear expectations as humans because nobody wakes up and is like, well, I don't know if I'm going to win or lose today. I'd rather know how to win.
I've been surprised because there's sometimes that I actually, even though I'm a direct person, is that I sometimes have some hesitancy on how direct to be with a colleague or a subordinate. And I have been pleasantly surprised in recent years of just how open people are to wanting feedback. And as long as it's done in a positive way,
that's right.
I think it can be extremely effective.
Well, and the things I say to the people who are hesitant to give that direct feedback, wouldn't you want to know if there was a better way or a more efficient way to do your job? And most of the time, everybody says yes. I've never had anybody say no. So keep that in mind when the next time you're hesitant to share feedback. It's a favor to the other person so that they can make adjustments and improve.
The great exclamation mark. So, Kiley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
That wraps up today's conversation on what really drives high-performing teams. A big thank you to Kiley for sharing her insights on how visibility, resilience, and accountability work together to create healthier, more effective teams. As we heard, performance isn't just about what people do, it's about how they're wired, how they collaborate and communicate, and how we design systems that help them succeed. When leaders understand their people through behavioral data, build resilience through intentional development, and structure accountability around natural strengths, performance stops being accidental. It becomes repeatable. If you'd like to learn more about how McGuire Sponsel approaches team performance and people strategy as part of our 2030 vision, visit McGuireSponsel.com or reach out directly to Kiley. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Tax. See you next time.